My name is Margaret Wilson, and 43 years ago, I made a promise to myself standing on a patch of barren land in Texas. I was 22 years old, pregnant, and holding divorce papers in one hand and my last $3,000 in the other. My husband had just walked out, saying he wasn't ready to be tied down to some ranch fantasy and a screaming baby. I looked at that empty land and whispered, "I'll build something here that will last forever." I had no idea that 43 years later, my own son would destroy it all in a single week. But let me tell you what I built first, because you need to understand what was taken from me. Those early years were brutal. I worked 3 jobs while pregnant, cleaning offices at night, waitressing during lunch hours, and doing bookkeeping for local businesses on weekends. When Brandon was born, I strapped him to my chest and kept working. There was no time to rest, no time to grieve my failed marriage, no time for anything except survival in that ranch dream. I bought the land with every penny I had saved, 300 acres of nothing but dirt, rocks, and stubborn grass. The real estate agent actually laughed when I signed the papers. "Ma'am, you sure you know what you're getting into? This land hasn't produced anything valuable in 50 years. I just smiled and said, "Then I guess it's time for a change." The first year, Brandon and I lived in a trailer so small I could touch both walls with my arms stretched out. I had to drive 20 miles to the nearest grocery store, and when it rained, the dirt road became impassable. Some nights I'd sit outside that trailer, holding my baby boy and wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. But every morning, I'd look at that land and see potential. I saw cattle grazing, I saw green pastures, I saw a home where Brandon could grow up proud of what his mother had built. By the time Brandon was 5, I'd managed to buy my first 20 head of cattle with money I'd saved working as a ranch hand for our neighbors. I learned everything: how to mend fences, how to deliver calves, how to read the weather and know when to move the herd. My hands became permanently stained with dirt, and my back ached constantly. But those cattle represented hope. Brandon used to follow me around the ranch, asking a million questions. "Mama, why do the cows moo like that? Mama, can I help feed them? Mama, will this ranch be mine someday?" "Someday, baby," I'd tell him, ruffling his hair. "Someday this will all be yours." 20 years of 16-hour days. 20 years of reinvesting every single dollar back into the ranch. While other women my age were going on vacations or buying nice clothes, I was repairing equipment and expanding the herd. I wore the same 3 pairs of jeans for 15 years because every extra dollar went into improving the land. When Brandon was in high school, I finally built the main house, a beautiful 2-story ranch home with wraparound porches and windows that looked out over our now thriving pastures. By then, we had 500 head of cattle, and I'd bought out 3 neighboring properties. The Wilson Ranch had become one of the most successful operations in the county. Brandon brought friends home from school sometimes, and they'd stare wide-eyed at our land, stretching to the horizon. "Your mom built all this?" they'd ask him. And Brandon would puff up with pride and say, "Yeah, my mom's the toughest rancher in Texas." I put him through college. Every penny of his tuition, room, and board came from the ranch profits. When he graduated with his business degree, I threw him the biggest party the county had ever seen. I was so proud, so sure that he'd come back and help me take the ranch to the next level. But Brandon had other ideas. He moved to Dallas, got a job at a consulting firm, and visited maybe twice a year. Each visit was shorter than the last, and he'd spend most of his time on his phone, complaining about the slow internet and lack of decent restaurants. "Mom, you should think about downsizing," he'd say. "This place is too much work for someone your age." I'd laugh it off. "Son, this ranch is my life's work. I'll run it until the day I die." Last year, at 65, I was still personally overseeing every aspect of the operation. I knew every cow by sight, every fence post that needed repair, every patch of grass that grew differently depending on the rainfall. The ranch was valued at $4 million, and it generated steady income that could support our family for generations. but Brandon rarely called anymore. He was busy with his life in the city, busy with work, busy with everything except the legacy I'd spent my entire adult life building for him. Then, 3 months ago, everything changed. Brandon called on a Thursday evening, and his voice sounded different, excited in a way I hadn't heard since he was a child. "Mom, I'm bringing someone home to meet you this weekend, someone special." My heart leaped. After years of casual dating, was my son finally ready to settle down? Jessica Martinez arrived wearing designer clothes that probably cost more than I spent on groceries in 6 months. She was pretty, polished, and clearly uncomfortable the moment she stepped out of Brandon's BMW onto our gravel driveway. "This is rustic," she said, looking around at the ranch buildings like she was surveying a crime scene. During dinner that first night, Jessica asked a lot of questions about the ranch, but not the kind I expected. She didn't ask about the cattle or the land management or the history of what we'd built. Instead, she focused on numbers. "So this property is worth $4 million? And it's just the two of you living here? That seems like an inefficient use of valuable real estate." I felt something cold settle in my stomach, but I kept my voice pleasant. "Well, it's not just real estate, dear. It's a working ranch. It's our livelihood. But surely you could sell it and invest the money more wisely? $4 million could generate significant returns in the stock market, and you could buy a nice little condo somewhere convenient." Brandon jumped in quickly. "Jessica's got an MBA from Wharton, Mom. She knows about these things." I looked at my son, really looked at him. When had he started viewing his childhood home as nothing more than a financial asset to be optimized? "This ranch isn't just an investment, Brandon," I said carefully. "It's our family legacy. It's what I built for you, for your children someday." Jessica laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Legacy? Brandon? You don't even live here. You live in a modern city with culture and opportunities. Why would you want to be tied down to some old ranch in the middle of nowhere?" That night, after they'd gone to bed in the guest room, I sat on my front porch and looked out over the land I'd carved from nothing. 43 years of work, and my son's girlfriend saw it as nothing more than outdated real estate. But I told myself Jessica was just young, just didn't understand yet. Surely Brandon would help her see what this place really meant. I was wrong. Over the next few days, I watched Jessica work on my son like water working on stone. Every conversation somehow circled back to how isolated the ranch was, how inefficient it was for just one person to live on so much valuable land, how much better their lives could be with that kind of money invested properly. "Brandon, think about it," she said during breakfast on their last morning. "Your mother could buy a beautiful condo in Austin or San Antonio, somewhere with medical facilities nearby and social opportunities. She'd be much happier. And you'd finally be free to focus on your own life without worrying about all this responsibility." She said the word responsibility like it tasted bitter. Brandon nodded slowly, and I saw something shift in his eyes. "You might be right, Jess. Mom, maybe it is time to think about simplifying your life." "My life is simple," I said, trying to keep the edge out of my voice. "I love this ranch. I love this work. This is my home." "But Mom," Brandon said, and his voice had taken on that patient tone adults use with stubborn children. "You're 65 years old. You shouldn't be managing livestock and maintaining buildings at your age. What if you get hurt? What if you have a medical emergency out here?" "I've been managing just fine for 43 years. Jessica leaned forward, her smile sharp and calculated. "Mrs. Wilson, you've done an amazing job building this place. But Brandon's right. You deserve to relax and enjoy your golden years. Let someone else worry about cattle and fence repairs. Take the money and really live." After they left that Sunday, I felt something I hadn't experienced since those early desperate years. Fear. Not fear of physical danger or financial ruin, but fear that everything I'd worked for was about to slip away. Brandon started calling more often after that visit, but the conversations were different. He'd ask pointed questions about ranch operations, about maintenance costs, about my long-term plans. He'd mention Jessica's suggestions about downsizing and smart investing, and how I could enjoy life more without all the stress of ranch management. "Mom, I've been thinking," he said during one call. "What if something happens to you? What if you fall and break a hip or have a heart attack? You're all alone out there." "I have neighbors, Brandon. I have friends. The Hendersons check on me every day." But that's not the same as having professional medical care nearby. In a city, you'd have hospitals, doctors, emergency services just minutes away. I began to understand that this wasn't concern for my welfare. This was a campaign. 2 weeks later, Brandon announced he was taking vacation time to come help me organize some things around the ranch. He arrived on a Monday morning with Jessica and a rental truck. "We thought we'd help you sort through some of Dad's old stuff in the barn," he said. "And maybe we could talk about getting the property appraised, just so you know what your options are." I should have said no right then. I should have told them to leave immediately. But he was my son, and some part of me kept hoping this was all just a phase, just Jessica's influence that would fade once she realized how much the ranch meant to our family. Instead, I watched them spend the week cataloging my possessions like they were preparing for an estate sale. Jessica took pictures of everything, the furniture, the artwork, even the ranch equipment. She made lists on her tablet and had hushed conversations with Brandon about market values and liquidation. Brandon spent hours on the phone with people he claimed were financial advisors and investment specialists. He had the property surveyed and appraised without asking my permission. When I confronted him about it, he said, "Mom, I'm just trying to help you understand your options. Knowledge is power, right?" By Friday of that week, they had transformed my home into a real estate showroom. They'd rearranged furniture, hidden personal photos, and even bought fresh flowers for the kitchen table. "Why does the house look like it's staged for sale?" I asked. "We just wanted to see how it would look with better presentation," Jessica said innocently. "You'd be amazed how much difference good staging makes in property value." That night, after they'd gone to bed, I called my lawyer, Jim Patterson. Jim had handled the ranch's legal affairs for 20 years, and I trusted him completely. "Jim, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. If something happened to me, what would happen to the ranch?" "Well, Margaret, according to your will, everything goes to Brandon." "Is there some reason you're concerned about that?" I told him about the past few weeks, about Jessica's influence, about Brandon's sudden interest in property values and investment opportunities. Jim was quiet for a long moment. "Margaret, I think you need to be very careful. If Brandon has power of attorney, or if anything happens to you, he could make decisions about the ranch that you might not approve of. But surely he wouldn't sell it without my permission. If you were declared incompetent, or if he could demonstrate that maintaining the ranch was beyond your physical capabilities, he might be able to make that argument in court, especially with a good lawyer." That conversation kept me awake all night. Saturday morning, I woke up to find Brandon and Jessica in my kitchen, sitting at the table with a stack of papers between them. "Mom, we need to talk," Brandon said. "Sit down." The papers were sale documents. Brandon had already arranged for the ranch to be sold to a development company for $4 million. "You can't be serious," I whispered. "Mom, we've thought about this very carefully," Brandon said. "This is what's best for everyone. You'll get enough money to live comfortably for the rest of your life without all the stress and physical demands of running this place. Best for everyone? Brandon, this ranch is my life's work. It's our family's legacy." Jessica leaned forward with that sharp smile again. "Mrs. Wilson, legacy is a lovely sentiment, but it's not practical. Brandon doesn't want to be a rancher. He has his own career, his own life. Why should he be burdened with maintaining this property when the money could be working for both of you?" "Burdened?" The word came out as a croak. "This ranch isn't a burden, it's a gift. It's security. It's—" "Mom!" Brandon's voice was firm now, like he was talking to a confused child. "I've already signed the preliminary paperwork. The sale will go through next week." The room started spinning. "You can't sell my ranch without my signature." Brandon and Jessica exchanged a look. "Actually, Mom, I can. You gave me power of attorney last year when you had that minor surgery, remember? For medical decisions? Well, the document was broader than that." I remembered signing papers when I'd had my gallbladder removed. Brandon had said it was just in case something went wrong during surgery, just so he could make medical decisions if I was unconscious. I'd trusted him completely. That was for medical emergencies, not for selling my property. "The document gives me authority to make financial decisions on your behalf if I determine that you're no longer capable of managing your affairs properly," Brandon said. "And Mom, honestly, a 65-year-old woman living alone on a $4 million ranch, doing physical labor every day. It's not sustainable. I'm perfectly capable of managing my affairs." Jessica opened a folder and spread photographs across the table. Pictures of me struggling to lift a hay bale. Pictures of me looking exhausted after a long day. Pictures taken without my knowledge or consent. "These photos show someone who's clearly struggling with the physical demands of ranch work," she said smoothly. "Brandon is just being a good son, looking out for your welfare." I stared at my son. This man I'd raised, this person I'd sacrificed everything for, and realized I was looking at a stranger. "How long have you been planning this?" "Since I met Jessica," he said. "She helped me see that I was being selfish, letting you exhaust yourself maintaining this place just because I was too sentimental to make the hard decisions." "Too sentimental? Brandon, this ranch is your inheritance. This is what I built for you." "I don't want it, Mom. I never wanted it. I want you to be safe and comfortable, and I want to be free to live my own life without constantly worrying about whether you're going to fall off a horse or get trampled by cattle." The sale went through the following Friday. I spent that week in a daze, watching strangers walk through my home, measuring rooms and making notes about development potential. The new owners planned to tear down everything I'd built and construct a subdivision called Wilson Ranch Estates. Even my name would survive only as a marketing gimmick. On the day I had to leave, Brandon handed me a check for $15,000. "This should cover your expenses while you find a nice apartment somewhere," he said. "There's a retirement community in Austin that Jessica found online. It has social activities and medical facilities on site." $15,000 out of $4 million. "Brandon, where's the rest of the money?" "Well, there were taxes, legal fees, real estate commissions, and I had to pay back some loans I'd taken out over the years. Plus, maintaining this place has been expensive. After everything was settled, this is your share." "My share? Of my own ranch?" Jessica stepped forward with that poisonous smile. "Mrs. Wilson, Brandon has been supporting this ranch financially for years. All those repairs, the equipment maintenance, the property taxes. Where did you think that money was coming from?" It was a lie. I'd maintained detailed financial records for 43 years. The ranch had been profitable every single year. But I realized that arguing was pointless. They'd already rewritten history to justify what they'd done. "Go live far away from here," Brandon said, not meeting my eyes. "Start fresh, somewhere new. You'll be happier." I stood in the driveway of the ranch I'd built from nothing, holding a check for $15,000, watching my son and his girlfriend load their BMW with items they'd taken from my house. Family photos, my grandmother's china, even my father's old cattle brand. And I laughed. I laughed so hard that both of them stopped and stared at me with concern, probably wondering if I'd finally cracked under the pressure. But I wasn't laughing because I'd lost my mind. I was laughing because they had no idea what I'd done 3 days earlier, when Jim Patterson had called me with an urgent warning about something he'd discovered in the property records. They thought they'd won. They thought they'd gotten away with stealing my life's work. But they had no idea that sometimes the most important victories happen in complete silence, and sometimes the most devastating defeats come wrapped in what looks like success. I climbed into my old pickup truck, started the engine, and drove away from the ranch without looking back. Let them enjoy their victory. It wouldn't last long. 3 days before Brandon handed me that $15,000 check, my phone rang at 6 in the morning. It was Jim Patterson, my lawyer, and his voice carried an urgency I'd never heard before. "Margaret, I need you to come to my office immediately. Don't tell anyone where you're going, and don't discuss this with Brandon until we've talked." I'd known Jim for 20 years. He wasn't prone to dramatics or early morning emergencies, so I threw on my clothes and drove straight to his office in town. Jim was waiting with a pot of coffee and a manila folder thick with documents. His usually calm demeanor was replaced by something that looked like barely controlled anger. "Margaret, sit down. What I'm about to tell you is going to make you furious, but I need you to stay calm and listen to everything before you react." He opened the folder and spread papers across his desk. Property deeds, legal documents, official forms I didn't recognize. "Yesterday, a title company called me to verify some information about your ranch. Apparently, Brandon has been in contact with them for weeks, preparing for a sale. When I told them that any sale would require your signature as the legal owner, they seemed confused." Jim pulled out a document and handed it to me. "They faxed me this. Take a look." It was a power of attorney form, but not the simple medical directive I remembered signing before my surgery. This document gave Brandon sweeping authority over all my financial affairs, including the right to sell real estate on my behalf. "Jim, this isn't what I signed. The paper Brandon gave me was 1 page, just for medical decisions if something went wrong during surgery." "I know, and here's where it gets interesting." Jim pulled out another set of papers. "I requested copies of all documents filed with your signature from the past year. Look at the dates." My signature appeared on the comprehensive power of attorney document, dated 2 weeks after my surgery, not before. "Brandon forged this?" "It appears so, but here's the thing, Margaret. Even if this document were legitimate, he couldn't legally sell your ranch without your knowledge." "What do you mean?" Jim leaned forward, and for the first time that morning he smiled. "Because you don't own just the surface rights to that land. You own what's underneath it, too. And 3 months ago, something very interesting was discovered under your property." He pulled out a geological survey report dated 3 months earlier. "The Hartley Oil Company has been quietly surveying land in this county. They found significant oil deposits and natural gas reserves under several properties, including yours." I stared at the technical diagrams and numbers, trying to understand what this meant. "Margaret, based on these surveys, the mineral rights under your ranch are worth approximately $12 million. Even if Brandon somehow managed to sell the surface rights legally, he can't touch what's underneath unless you specifically transfer the mineral rights. $12 million? Possibly more. Hartley Oil wants to lease your mineral rights for extraction. They've been trying to contact you for weeks, but apparently Brandon has been intercepting their calls and letters." Jim showed me a stack of correspondence addressed to me that I'd never seen. Letters from Hartley Oil, geological surveys, lease offers, all intercepted before they reached me. "Brandon knew about this?" "He had to. Look at this." Jim handed me a letter dated 6 weeks ago. "This is from Hartley Oil, addressed to Brandon at his Dallas office. They assumed he was your business manager and were negotiating directly with him for your mineral rights. The letter outlined a lease agreement that would pay me $50,000 per month in royalties, with a $2 million signing bonus for the rights to extract oil and gas from my land. Jim, if this is true, why would Brandon want to sell the ranch? He could make more money keeping it and leasing the mineral rights." Jim's expression darkened. "Because Brandon told Hartley Oil that you weren't mentally competent to make business decisions, and that he was seeking legal guardianship to manage your affairs. He was planning to have you declared incompetent, sell the ranch to his development company friends, and then lease the mineral rights himself as your legal guardian." The room started spinning. My own son wasn't just stealing my ranch, he was planning to have me declared mentally incompetent to steal everything underneath it too. The beauty of it, Jim continued, is that the development company buying your ranch doesn't know about the oil deposits. They're planning to build houses on top of $12 million worth of mineral rights they don't own. Brandon would keep the mineral rights, lease them to Hartley Oil, and collect $50,000 a month for the rest of his life, while I live in some retirement home on $15,000. Exactly. I sat in silence for several minutes, processing the magnitude of my son's betrayal. This wasn't just greed or Jessica's influence. This was calculated, long-term financial fraud that would have left me penniless while he became a millionaire. Jim, what can we do? Well, that's the interesting part. Brandon made one crucial mistake. Jim pulled out a fresh set of legal documents. In Texas, mineral rights can be separated from surface rights. Since you're still legally competent and you're still the rightful owner of your property, we can separate your mineral rights from the surface rights right now, today. What does that mean? It means that even if Brandon somehow manages to sell your ranch, you'll still own everything valuable underneath it. The new owners will own the surface, the buildings, the pastures, the development rights, but you'll own the oil, the gas, and the mineral extraction rights. Jim spread out a new set of documents. If you sign these papers today, you'll retain ownership of all mineral rights on your property in perpetuity. Brandon can sell the ranch, but he'll essentially be selling worthless land while you keep the $12 million treasure underneath it. And Hartley Oil will pay me directly $50,000 per month, plus a $2 million signing bonus. Brandon will have no legal claim to any of it. I looked at the papers, thinking about my son planning to have me declared mentally incompetent, planning to steal not just my ranch, but my entire future. Where do I sign? We spent the next 3 hours separating my mineral rights from my surface rights and signing a lease agreement with Hartley Oil. Jim handled everything through a private filing that wouldn't appear in public records for 30 days, long after Brandon's sale would be complete. Margaret, there's one more thing, Jim said as we finished the paperwork. Hartley Oil needs to begin preliminary extraction operations within 60 days of signing the lease. That means they'll be drilling on the property, whether Brandon likes it or not. What will happen when the new owners find out? They'll discover they bought land they can't develop because you own the rights to everything underneath it. The mineral rights take legal precedence over surface development. They won't be able to build houses on top of active oil wells. Jim handed me a check, my $2 million signing bonus from Hartley Oil. Your son thinks he's stealing your life's work for $4 million. He has no idea that you just became worth more than $12 million. I drove home that day with the check in my purse and legal documents securing my mineral rights locked in my safe. For the next 3 days, I watched Brandon and Jessica plan their theft, knowing that their victory would be short-lived. When Brandon handed me that $15,000 check and told me to go live far away from here, I laughed because I was already richer than he would ever be. But I didn't tell him. I didn't confront him or reveal what I knew. Instead, I decided to let him discover the truth the same way he'd made his plans. In secret, gradually, and far too late to change anything. I moved into a small apartment in Austin, 20 miles from the ranch. It was a modest 2-bedroom place with a view of the city, nothing fancy or expensive. I wanted Brandon to believe his plan had worked perfectly. The first month's royalty payment arrived 4 weeks later, $50,000 deposited directly into my new bank account. I used it to furnish my apartment simply and comfortably, nothing that would attract attention or suggest I had money. I also used some of the money to hire a private investigator named Sarah Chen. I wanted to know exactly what Brandon and Jessica were doing with the ranch, and I wanted documentation of everything. Sarah's first report arrived 2 weeks later. Brandon and Jessica had moved into the ranch house immediately after I left. They were planning an expensive wedding for the fall and had already started renovating the house with money from the ranch sale. They're spending like lottery winners, Sarah reported. New furniture, a pool installation, expensive cars. Jessica quit her job and is planning to become a lifestyle influencer, documenting their ranch life on social media. The irony was delicious. Jessica was going to build her influencer brand around living on a ranch that would soon be worthless. Meanwhile, Hartley Oil had begun their preliminary operations. They'd set up a temporary office in town and started conducting geological tests on the property. According to Sarah's surveillance, they'd contacted Brandon several times about accessing the land for their surveys. Brandon keeps telling them he owns the mineral rights, Sarah reported. He's apparently trying to renegotiate the lease terms for more money. Hartley Oil seems confused about who they're supposed to be dealing with. Perfect. Let him think he was in control. 3 months after leaving the ranch, I received a frantic phone call from Brandon. "Mom, where are you? I've been trying to reach you for weeks." "I'm in Austin, dear, living in a retirement community like you suggested. It's lovely here." "Mom, there's some kind of mix-up with the ranch. An oil company keeps calling, saying they have a lease agreement with you. I told them that's impossible because I'm managing your affairs now." "Oh, that's strange. What kind of oil company?" "Hartley Oil. They claim you signed some sort of lease for mineral rights. But that's crazy, right? I mean, you couldn't have signed anything without me knowing about it." I let the silence stretch for a moment. "Brandon, I'm an old woman living on $15,000. Why would an oil company want to talk to me?" "Exactly, that's what I told them. But they keep insisting they have legal documents with your signature." "Well, I'm sure you'll figure it out, dear. You're so much better at business than I am." That conversation was the beginning of Brandon's education in the consequences of his actions. 2 weeks later, Sarah called with an update that made me smile. "Margaret, you need to hear this. Hartley Oil showed up at the ranch yesterday with drilling equipment. Brandon tried to have them removed for trespassing, but they presented a court order giving them access to the mineral rights you own. Brandon called the sheriff, but the sheriff sided with Hartley Oil. What did Brandon do? He called his lawyer in Dallas. Apparently, the lawyer told him that if you really do own the mineral rights, there's nothing Brandon can do to stop the drilling. The lawyer is driving down today to review the legal documents. I could picture Brandon's face when his lawyer explained that he'd stolen a ranch but lost a fortune. The phone calls from Brandon became daily occurrences. "Mom, we need to talk about this mineral rights situation. Can you come back to the ranch?" "Oh, Brandon, I don't think that's a good idea. You told me to live far away, remember?" "This is important, Mom. There might be some legal complications with the ranch sale." "Complications? But you said everything was handled properly." "Well, yes, but..." "Mom, did you sign anything with an oil company? Anything at all?" "Sweetheart, I'm just a simple rancher. I don't know anything about oil companies." Each conversation revealed more of Brandon's growing panic as he realized the magnitude of what he'd lost. 4 months after leaving the ranch, I received the most satisfying phone call of my life. "Mrs. Wilson, this is Bradley Hartman from Hartman, Stevens and Associates. I represent your son, Brandon Wilson. We need to discuss a legal matter regarding mineral rights on the former Wilson Ranch." "Oh my, that sounds serious." "Ma'am, it appears that you retained ownership of valuable mineral rights when the ranch was sold. My client was unaware of this arrangement and would like to discuss purchasing those rights from you." "Purchasing them? For how much?" "We're prepared to offer you $500,000 for a complete transfer of all mineral rights." I almost laughed out loud. Brandon was trying to buy back $12 million worth of mineral rights for $500,000. "Mr. Hartman, that's very generous, but I'm quite happy with my current arrangement with Hartley Oil." "Mrs. Wilson, I think there may be some confusion about the value of these rights. My client believes you may have been taken advantage of by Hartley Oil." "Oh, I don't think so. They seem very fair. They pay me $50,000 every month, and they gave me a lovely signing bonus." There was a long pause. $50,000 per month? "Yes, isn't that nice? It's much more than I need for my little apartment." Another pause. Mrs. Wilson, would it be possible to meet with you in person? My client is very anxious to resolve this matter. I'm sorry, Mr. Hartman, but I'm quite happy with things as they are. Please tell Brandon that his mother is doing just fine on her own. That evening, Brandon called me directly, and for the first time since this entire ordeal began, I heard genuine emotion in his voice. Mom, please, I made a mistake. I should have talked to you about the ranch instead of just doing what I did. But we can fix this. We can work together. Brandon, you told me I wasn't capable of managing my own affairs. You said I was too old and incompetent to make decisions about my property. Why would you want to work with someone like that? I was wrong, Mom. I was listening to bad advice and I was worried about you and I made bad decisions. Bad decisions? Brandon, you stole my ranch. You forged legal documents. You planned to have me declared mentally incompetent. Those weren't bad decisions. That was deliberate fraud. For the first time, Brandon was speechless. But here's the thing, son. I don't need your apology. I don't need you to fix anything. For the first time in 43 years, I'm completely free. I don't have to worry about cattle or fences or equipment repairs. I just have to cash my royalty checks every month. Mom, those mineral rights are worth millions. You could share them with family instead of giving everything to some oil company. Family? Brandon, you are my family. You were my family when you stole my ranch, and you're my family now that you realize what you lost. But I learned something important these past few months. What's that? I learned that I don't need anyone to validate my worth or my decisions. I spent 43 years building something for you, and you destroyed it in a week. But what I built for myself, my independence, my strength, my ability to survive anything, that's something you can never take away. The development company that bought the ranch discovered they couldn't build their subdivision because of the active oil drilling operations. They sued Brandon for failing to disclose the mineral rights issue, and he had to return most of the purchase money. Jessica left him 6 months later when she realized that their ranch lifestyle influencer dream was dead, and Brandon was facing financial ruin from legal fees and lawsuits. I heard through town gossip that Brandon moved back to Dallas, back to his consulting job, back to the life he'd chosen over the legacy I'd built for him. A year after leaving the ranch, I established the Wilson Foundation for Rural Education, funded entirely by my mineral rights royalties. We provide scholarships for farm kids who want to go to college and grants for rural schools that need equipment. I also bought a small house outside Austin with a view of rolling hills that remind me of my old ranch. I have a garden now and a few chickens and neighbors who know me as Margaret, the retired teacher, not Margaret, the oil heiress. Sometimes I drive past the old ranch property. The house Brandon and Jessica renovated sits empty now, with for sale signs that have been there for months. The oil derricks operate 24 hours a day, extracting wealth from land that Brandon thought he'd stolen but never really owned. Yesterday, I received a letter from Brandon. He's engaged to someone new, someone who apparently doesn't know about the ranch debacle. He invited me to the wedding and asked if we could start fresh. I wrote back a simple response. I'm happy for you, Brandon. I hope you've learned that some things in life are more valuable than money, and some mistakes can't be undone. I wish you well, but I've started my own fresh beginning, and it doesn't include people who see me as either a burden or a bank account. I don't hate my son. Hate requires energy I'd rather spend on better things. But I don't need his forgiveness or his presence in my life either. Some victories don't require applause or witnesses. Some victories are quiet, private satisfactions that grow stronger with time. I built something once that lasted 43 years. Brandon destroyed it in a week. But what I built from the ashes of his betrayal will last forever. And that knowledge, that quiet triumph, is worth more than any ranch, any oil well, or any son who sees his mother as nothing more than a problem to be solved. I am Margaret Wilson, and I am finally completely free.